so glad I met a 49ers fan. Let me tell you something. You
Tell
don't
me.
know how many people I've talked to since the Super Bowl, and I'm like, are you they live in San Francisco. Are you a 49ers fan? No, not really. I know people, but I'm so glad I finally found one. So you were rooting for the 49ers this year.
I am. I root for
Okay.
the 49ers since I was 8 years old.
I am so glad that I've run into you because I just don't find people that are like, yeah, 49ers. Because when you come from Kansas City, I mean, this is a part of our whole nomenclature.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm in my sports room right now, and it's all of my photos besides the Muhammad Ali
Yeah.
pictures and Michael Jordan pictures. It's all Niners, all
Okay.
Niners.
Cool, man. I love it. I love it. Well, of course, I'm in Kansas City. It's great to meet you. I can't wait to peel back the layers of your life and education and everything you're doing right now. But
Sure.
before we get to that point, 4 years ago, we were all trying to figure out how long is this pandemic going to last? What are the ramifications? And now that we're kind of in this post-pandemic era, how did you survive it and how did it change you?
Oh man, you know what? I think the biggest thing for me, because at the time my kids were just coming into their teenage years. Well, my son was probably about 14, 15, because he's graduating actually tomorrow. He's got his commencements. But the hardest thing was trying to homeschool your kids. I found, and because I'm a pretty much an introvert, so I was okay being in my home and going hiking and being out in nature and doing my thing. So I didn't need people as much. But the biggest thing was my kids. They're social and they play sports and they missed it. That was probably the biggest thing I think was that piece was just watching them suffer more than me.
Well, they didn't have enough time on this planet to conceptualize something that big. We built up resilience, but I work as an IT technician for a large school district in Kansas City,
Okay.
and I've just entered my 19th year this year, so I've seen a lot of things happen in education. And my wife's a fifth grade teacher, and I'm telling you, the
Oh.
emotional stunting, the educational blockade that has been foisted on these kids because of that absence is going to be a residual that we're going to deal with for a long time.
Yeah, well, and that's what I wrote. That's what my book's about. Schools are so emotional, and it started pre-COVID, but COVID just exasperated it and sped it up. 5 or 6 years, I think, in my mind, because I mean, I think ultimately our kids were getting hit with social media and gaming and technology pre-COVID, but then COVID hit, and that's what parents did. They leaned on it more and more, and as a result, our schools are some can be pretty nightmarish, I would say, if they're not organized and run properly and if they're not supported well enough. And I'm sure your wife can attest about it every day. If you're working in tech, you're going to a lot of schools, my guess is, and seeing a lot of things, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I always feel like the janitor from Breakfast Club. I'm the eyes and ears of the
You know
institution.
everything. Yeah. The cooks and the janitors, they know
Everything.
everything. Yeah,
Everything. They're the ones that know where the treasure is at the end of Shawshank. They're the
that's it.
guys.
That's it, man. When I go to a new school, the first person I talk to is normally the custodian, bus drivers, and the cooks. Well, I'm Italian, so I'm always in the kitchen, but
Yeah, yeah.
that's my top three. And then I hit regular staff.
Yeah. So where's your ancestors from in Italy?
They're from it's a province of Trentino, so we're about an hour and a half. The little town we're from is about an hour and a half from Venice, hour and a
Okay.
half from Milan. It's a bit of a triangle, so northern Italy, right in the Dolomites there, the Alps. It's
Okay.
beautiful.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, half of my family is from Shaka, Sicily, and the other half is
Oh,
from Naples. So,
so you're Sicilian. You're right, mafia then.
yeah, right. Whereas my dad used to, my dad looked like a guy that fell out of a Godfather movie. And
Oh
he
yeah.
used he used to always tell me when it came to the mafia, be careful about pissing in the river because one day you may have to drink out of it. That was his
Yeah.
quote all the time.
Love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
So I remember the first time I went to Italy, I went to see a pen pal that I was writing in high school. She was in a
Yeah.
little town south of Florence called Castle Ferentino. It's a family-owned operation, but I had to fly into Milan, and there was a furniture convention there, and it was
Oh,
crazy. There was no hotels. When I was coming back, I had to sleep in the airport, but I was in the motherland, so it was okay. I love Italy.
Oh, me too. I've been back. I don't know how, we have our family still over there and stuff. So
Oh,
I'm
cool.
over there quite a bit. It's for me though, it's like you go home and, I haven't been south of Rome. That's my only thing. The next time I go back, I got to go south of Rome. So, but it's, yeah, because my sister was over there, ran a business in Rome for a while, and my dad's sisters are still there. We have a house there. So it's kind
Wow.
of, you go home, you're on, and they're all apple farmers where my family's from. So it's all farming, and it's pretty cool. But different side of Italy, as opposed to the tourist side. Although I love
Yeah.
going to Venice and Pisa and Rome, I love it. But I love going to authentic Italy as well, right?
Yeah, get out in the land. Yeah, Rome for some reason really pulled on my strings. I don't know if there's a lineage in my spiritual timeline that spent time there, but I really felt impelled. Um, I stayed right outside the Vatican, which was just amazing in itself to see the Vatican at dusk. It's like just looking at the history and the statues and the ornate nature. It's you just can't explain that to people.
It's gorgeous. No, I remember the first time I went, and I was young, probably about 18, and I remember coming off the train, and I walked down this one street, and I could see at the very end the Colosseum, and I was like, this is the most impressive thing. Like, it's giving me goosebumps
Oh
right now,
yeah.
just seeing that visual. It's just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Italy's, I mean, it's one of those places, if you're a tourist, you got to go back 3 or 4 times to see the whole. Like I
Uh-huh.
said, I've been to Italy, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 times, and I haven't been south of Rome, and
Wow.
because there's just so much to see, right?
Oh,
But
yeah.
next trip is, I'm heading south, going down to see your brethren there,
There
your
you go.
familia.
I love
Yeah,
it. I love it. So let me ask you this. Here in 2024, if you were to be put in front of a bunch of third graders at career day, and one of the kids said, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
Uh, how would I answer that? I would tell them that I'm their support system, is what I would tell them. I wouldn't I my kids at my school, they call me by my first name. I don't go by Mr. Slanzi. I don't even have an office in my school anymore. I call my space the calming space for a reason, and I want my kids to know that they can lean on me, and that when they're stumbling and stuck, that they have the support, because a lot of kids now, mom and dad don't, teachers are struggling, and so I'm there to support teachers as well. So, I don't even know if half my kids know I'm a principal, to be honest. I'm just a fun guy where they can go to the room and, do Lego and sit around and work on the smart board and chat and do breathing activities. And, that's what my role is now as a school. And you can't get there though unless your school is organized and structured,
Yeah.
and you're leading your teachers the right way, right? So I'm in a position where I don't have to live in a hierarchy, because I've structured it properly, right? So when I'm sitting in front of third graders, and I eat lunch with first, second, third graders every day, because I make sure I'm at their level. As they just need to know I'm the guy that they go to when they're stuck.
Yeah.
You know?
That's the way
Yeah.
it should be. What did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream to grow up and become?
I wanted to play for the Niners.
Okay.
I wanted to play football. Unfortunately, here in Canada, it's not huge, right? But somehow I got my grandpa George, he's American, and he got me into football. But yeah, I wanted to play for the Niners, but one of the things that I always did, I was, as a young kid, I was the guy who was always coordinating hide and seek, road hockey, flag football. Like I was the guy.
Yeah.
And so as I grew up, I kind of went, geez, I'm pretty good at this teacher thing, right? And I went into being a lifeguard and teaching swimming lessons at 16 years old, and I just never looked back. It just was an easy, natural fit for me, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's wonderful. So, who's been kind of a hero or a inspiration for you in your life?
Oh boy, you know what? There's several people, but I would say the biggest inspiration for me was my grade 5 teacher, Mr. Riley. He was from South Africa, and he came to Canada, and he was teaching our class, and he was a bit strict. But the dude was so connected with us, and he knew every single kid in the class, and he knew everything we liked and everything we didn't like, and he knew what buttons to push. And you always felt when he was talking to you, he was talking to you,
Yeah.
and he wasn't looking past you, and he wasn't just paying you lip service, and And one of the cool things about Mr. Riley, I thought was, and this is back in the day, uh, in when I grew up in a small town, and we'd go every afternoon. We'd go for a hike up the mountain, and it was First Creek and Second Creek. And some days we'd go to First Creek, some days we'd go to Second Creek. And we made First Creek, he only had one beer, and we went to Second Creek, he'd have three beers, and he'd have lawn chairs at both places. And we'd hike up there in the afternoon. He'd have a beer, and we'd be playing in the bushes, exploring, and then we go back to school, and but like I said, strict teacher. We all learned, our learning curve was like that,
Yeah.
right? So he was a fantastic teacher, and he drove us hard in terms of our learning, but he also wanted us to explore. He wanted us to figure out who we were, and actually in my book, that's who I acknowledged, and he's the guy, Mr. Riley.
Is he still around?
He is. He's 90 some odd years old. He actually lives, and I didn't know this. My dad lives about an hour and a half away. He lives where in the same town my dad lives in.
Wow.
I thought he had passed, but when I published my book, it kind of, took off a bit, and I got a message on LinkedIn from his daughter saying, "Hey, are you talking about John Riley?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, She said, "That's my dad." She goes, "I
Wow.
shared you." So I haven't been up there to see him. I'm going to try to get up there and thank him. But he really impacted my life because I had him for both grade 5 and grade 6 because it was one of those split classes. And he was just an inspiration because he was an intellect, he was an athlete, he was tough, but he was kind, and he just one of those guys that you knew you could lean on.
So if you could get into a time machine and go back in the annals of 49ers history and see one football game, where are you going?
Oh man, man, man. I'd want to go see the catch. I don't want to see Dwight Clark catching that ball in the end zone, I think. But then you know what? At some of those games with the Packers and the Cowboys, like
Yeah.
and now we're going to beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl this year. So if I could fast forward, so one of the things about me is every year I go see a 49ers game. So like last year, I went to see San Fran play the Giants, but this year I'm going to Tampa Bay and I'm going to go watch them play the Bucks. So, um, yeah, I just, you know what? Oh, I would love to go see a game with Montana in it, then a game with Steve Young in it,
Yeah.
and I would have liked to go see, when Kaepernick had that big the Packers where he rushed for I don't even know, it was
Yeah.
200. There's just so many monumental times in 49ers history, right? That I would love to see Jerry Rice, in his prime, running through the slot, catching the ball, going, 70 yards for a touchdown. Like, yeah, yeah,
I did see Montana play for the Chiefs, and it was a really miserably cold day and they lost the game. But I remember just that was one of the very few times during that period of our drought where everybody was really excited because he was here in town. But yeah, I that year that we beat the 49ers when we snapped our 50-year drought, I saw the 49ers in preseason and they looked really good. I mean, they're all vying for a spot, so it was nothing real serious, but I thought it was really weird that I hadn't been to a preseason game in a long, long time, and it was kind of the precursor to that Super Bowl that year, so it was
uh, you
wild.
know, Patrick Mahomes is magical, though. I just don't
I
trust him.
know.
Every time we play him, he's the man. He's
I
the
mean,
man.
it must be the way that people feel about Tom Brady. Like Tom Brady can't go to Atlanta after that one Super Bowl. They talk about how if he goes down there, they still harbor a lot of hate, like serious hate for that one game where they were supposed to have won it.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's wild. Yeah, we got lucky, man. We got really, I mean, and that's the thing. The draft was here 2 years ago, and I just kept thinking, any team's one pick away from totally like Brock. I mean, he was the last pick in that draft.
yeah, dude. And people don't give him the credit, man. That
I
guy is
know.
he's a surgeon. He's a surgeon, and I think that's one of the things with Mahomes. He's a slinger, but that guy is smart.
He
Smart,
is.
smart, smart. And what? It's funny because I hate the Cowboys. I really hate the Seahawks. I hate the Packers. I can't hate the Chiefs, even though they beat us twice. And it's because of Mahomes. I just have a great appreciation for greatness, and on my wall, I've got Muhammad Ali and Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan. There's something about greatness. And that's what Mahomes is. He's just got it. He's just got it.
He's a
Yeah.
good dude. It's always weird to me because he built a huge house, that's really close to me. He's probably a few miles away from where I'm
Oh
at.
yeah.
And he's way back in the woods, but he's got a big compound back there. But when I saw that show on Netflix about him, I was like, it just upped the game because he's good with everybody that even knocks him down. He just has a good spirit about him. And I think a part of it is he had a good dad in Pat Mahomes Sr., and he was around the game his whole life, you know.
Yeah, well, and that's it. So I've coached basketball for 25 years, and both of my kids, since they were babies, they were on the court on the sideline with me. And my son ended up being a hell of a high school basketball player, setting school records and all of that stuff. And my daughter, she's a volleyball star. But you know what? If they're not immersed in sports from when they were tiny, they probably wouldn't have grabbed onto it and just because they could play anything. My kids could play. You throw any game at them, they'd be good at it because that's all they know,
Yeah.
right? And I
Yeah.
think when dads and moms have their kids around sports, they succeed.
Yeah, my son's on the spectrum. And I've always played sports with him. We throw the baseball around and we do things all the time. And he's got a really good swing. He's really good, has good instincts when it comes to it. So I think, yeah, no matter who they are and what aptitude they have, they can always get better at anything. What is it? Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book about how after 10,000 hours you can become a master at something.
Yeah, yeah, you
Yeah.
can. So hey, your son, when was he diagnosed? When did you figure out he was on the spectrum?
When he was a baby. It's
Oh,
been his
right
whole
away.
life.
Hey,
Yeah. He's
lucky
19.
you.
So
Yeah.
we've got on top of it in the beginning, got first steps in our house to do therapies, and didn't think he was going to talk. And now he talks to everybody all the time. So yeah, but yeah, it's been, and I've been in the special needs community my whole life. So,
Good. Yeah, so I've got a master's in special education. It's
oh,
it's kind of near and dear to my heart. That's one of the things I really I for parents, some parents don't push forward with assessments until grade 4, 5, grade 6, grade 6, and it's because they're in a school where they don't the personnel doesn't recognize signs, symptoms, or they're not surrounded by the right people. And it's so nice to hear when a family can get connected right off the bat and get those supports in for their kids, especially you at birth. I mean, that's awesome. It gives them a fighting chance, and depending on where they're on the spectrum, of course, right? But no, kudos to you. That's awesome. That's awesome.
yeah, they're special, man. There's a special way that they allow you to see the world, and they have special abilities and talents that I think at some point the human civilizations are going to tap into because there's a
Mhm.
savant nature. I remember there's a lot of things about Miles that's very unique. He basically has one extra long arm on his 15th chromosome that led to developmental delays. But the one thing, even when he was really young, is that he could always pick out that one Lego and a whole box of them that was just a little different or a different color. He just had this savant nature. He had a
Yeah.
friend that was really close to him. Her name's Charity, and she could remember the day of a birthday an entire 2 years ahead. So if you say
Mhm.
your birthday, she'll just say the day, and it's just like, what? How? It's
Bye.
crazy, dude.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's brilliant. It's funny because ironically, this morning at 10, we have a meeting with a mom who's bringing her autistic son in, and he's lower on the spectrum and stuff. And so we've got the speech language pathologist there, the occupational therapist, all our EAs, everybody's there, because he's verbal but nonverbal, like one word kind
Yep.
of things, and he's a bolter. But it's really cool to come in and have a meeting, with this mom because I think, last week I had another meeting with another kid who has autism who's higher on the spectrum. And every single meeting is different
Yep.
because every single autistic kid or kid with autism has something that's different, but everyone, like you said, has something that's incredibly special,
Yep.
incredibly. And it's like you just sit there and you wait for it. It's like there it is.
Yeah.
I love special. I love being in special ed. Yeah, it's part
Yeah.
of the reason why I think when you ask me that question about what would I say I am to grade theorists, it's that I'm sure your support system. And I think that comes from years of being a special ed teacher. And it's just how I roll is just I just love kids, and that's the Mr. Riley thing. I love everything about them and what they bring to the table. And there's no better group of kids than kids who have a disability because there's something unique that they have that we don't. And yeah, I just love being around them. It's my safe spot, really.
Well, that's great, man, because I have a deep level of admiration for everybody that's been an educator or a parent in his life that's been essential because it's really helped him um, become who he is. And they have to work so much harder. I mean, Miles is my hero. I mean, he definitely has to put a lot more work into being on this planet than anybody that I know because of the way that they just have to work harder what they do. So yeah, but that's great. I love that people are out there and they're celebrating and protecting and helping and it's good. So
Thing.
along those same lines, I'm curious, every day you wake up, what's your motivation to do this work? What is the ultimate drive for you to do this work and to also evolve as a human?
It's inherent. I wake, I'm one of those guys who wakes up at 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning. And, I can't stop researching. I can't stop digging, and I can't stop trying to figure out ways to make, these little guys that I'm going to go see this morning. I can't stop wanting them to become successful humans. And I find that research fascinating. It's almost like, I have this love for the 49ers. I have this love for sports that's inherent. It's like, whenever there's a game on, I got to watch it. Or if the Canucks are playing, I got to watch a Canucks game. And it's the same thing with going to work and going to school. I'm so curious to know what's coming next, especially now because kids are they're evolving, and they're changing into these, they're growing into adults in a way that we never did,
Yeah.
and it just fascinates me. So I'm up, like, when I get up in the morning, I grab my coffee and I'm on my laptop. And whether I'm doing stuff around my business and whatnot, but my business is education, so I'm constantly researching. And I'm just constantly trying to find ways. And one of the cool things is, with my son recently, he's graduated high school. He had offers to play basketball and he's chosen not to. And I was like, what? But you know what? He had scholarship offers and stuff. He goes, no, Dad, I need to get into kinesiology. I need to start making money. I need to start doing this. I need to get my ticket. And in the last 3 months, he's immersed himself in Duolingo to learn Italian. And we went camping with my dad the other night, and he's speaking it fluently in 3 months. I was like,
Wow.
what the hell? And I'm like, where is this? How? And this is what it is. It's just, kids are fascinating to me. And that whole field, just like the field of sports in the 49ers, that whole field, it excites me. And even, like, I'm probably about 5 years from retirement, and I will retire, but I'm never leaving education. I'm
Yeah.
never going to stop going and doing professional development for teachers. I'm in the middle of writing I've got 2 books on the go, actually, that I'm writing, and both in different kind of areas, and in education. But I just love it, man. It's just
Yeah.
one of those things where those little buggers are so interesting to me,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
For sure. So if you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating, who would it be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
Oh man, who would I love to meet and talk to? Oh, Brene Brown.
Okay.
I think I'd like to meet Brene Brown. I'm really into, like, emotions are a big thing for me when it comes to educating kids, because the more kids understand their emotions and the more they can regulate their emotions, as having a kid on the spectrum, like, that's a big thing. If they can get past whatever they're struggling with internally, they bloom, right? And I think, I would love to sit down with Brene Brown. I would also like to sit down with Deepak Chopra at some point. I think that I'm not a religious guy, but I am a spiritual guy. And yeah, I just, people that understand the soul. And that's what, go back to Mr. Riley. As strict as he was, and as demanding as he was, he knew our soul, and he knew, what was inside of us. And I think, if yeah, yeah,
There was an
Brene Brown.
there was an old teacher that I had in college. I was in I was getting into sports journalism, and there was a teacher. His name was Pierre Renaire, and he
Yeah.
was really a hard ass. You walked in, if you were late, you don't get a paycheck. You didn't turn in your assignment, you're fired. He treated you like a media company would, and he was really rough, and we all knew it. But I remember going after hours one time into his office, and he had all these posters of Australia, and he was a totally different dude. We just sat down. We talked about going to Australia, and he was just a totally different guy. And I remember he told me, he was like, the only way that I'm going to groom you guys for as hard as a life in Atlanta at CNN Towers would be is for me to do this to you, because it's going to show you, because the media is a cutthroat world and we're not going to play around. And I always remember, sometimes it's the ones that are really friendly and soft that you remember, not soft in a bad way, but in a good
Yeah.
way. But then there's the others that have that edge, and I'll never forget all of the things that he put into us. It was a big deal.
Yeah, and it's funny. When I went to college here in Canada, I took American history, and I had a professor. His name was Michael Gorman, and he was from San Diego, and he was such an amazing storyteller. I ended up doing got my degree in American history
Wow,
because of this guy. Yeah, and
that's
to this
great.
day, I find American politics and what you guys do down there is just fascinating. Because
Yeah,
Canada's it's so boring up here when it comes to politics, and but yeah, I just love that. And it's the same thing. This guy was he was just one of those inspirational dudes. And when you find people like that, and like you asked me when I wake up in the morning, I hope that I can inspire these kids to do great things, right?
yeah,
That's the
for
that's
sure.
the that's the ticket.
Absolutely. So of all of these things that you've done and accomplished in your life and become, what are you the proudest of?
Besides my kids, I guess,
Yeah.
because I'm pretty proud of what I've done with my kids, considering I was divorced, 13 years ago, and they had to go back and forth and juggle that stuff. I think the biggest thing for me is that I'm really good at going from one school to the next and rebuilding them. And I've gone from elementary schools to middle schools to high schools, and I often got moved into schools that were quite toxic. And usually they were toxic because of the relationship between teachers and admin and the district, and that whole mess. And I'm proud of the fact that I'm able to meander through all of that and create an organizational structure, through this relational leadership model and servant leadership model where you can bring people back together and love their jobs again. And I think that's probably, if I look back on my 25 years, there's been a lot of schools I went to where I reignited teachers, and it's what I do on the side of being a principal. It's why I write my book. It's all the professional development I do is I have to remind teachers that they are amazing people, because 95% of people who go into teaching are there for the right reasons. There's the 5% who didn't know what they wanted to do. It's like, yeah, I'll just teach. But 95% of teachers are, they're HSPs. They're highly sensitive people. They take their work home with them every day because they love so much. And you can attest to that, I'm sure, being in the district and your wife teaching grade 5. And I think that's what I'm most proud of over my years, is transforming schools into places where teachers feel like they got it again, and
Yeah.
that being said, I resigned from my school district because I got to a point where I couldn't do it, and I actually moved to an Indigenous school last year, partly because I'm fascinated by the Indigenous culture. So I'm in a school now where we drum every morning, and I'm learning to speak their language. And it's really kind of cool to work with Indigenous kids who the government kind of stepped on and squashed. And so now I'm in a new era there, right? But I get to do the same thing.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, all of the students, but you run the show. What's your perception of
Oh,
you? Who do you think you are?
you know what I think? It's funny. I think people think God, it's hard to talk like you don't want to sound egotistical. But people over my years have responded back to me with emails. Like when I wrote my book, for example, when it first came out, I got thousands of messages from people saying, I knew you would do this. This is you. Thank you for inspiring me. And I would say most of my sales went to former teachers and people who worked underneath me, because they knew where they stood. They knew that I had their back, just like I would have the grade 3s back. I'm supportive. I form relationships, and I always took my dad's advice. My dad, he came over to Canada from Italy and stuff, and he had to climb his way up. And he told me early on, and I've told my son the same thing. He said, Leroy, even if you're the boss, even if you're the foreman, if there's a hole to be and there's a shovel there, he goes, you never let your employees touch that shovel first. You grab that shovel and you dig the hole before anyone else does. And that's what I do. every single day. I constantly do not live in this world. If I'm the principal, I don't do. If teacher needs photocopies, I photocopy. If there's somebody's vomited on the floor, I've got the mop. If the kitchen needs me in there to dice some cucumber, I dice cucumber. And that's what I think the staff remembers me for. That being said, there's a line, and if a teacher's intent or somebody who works in the schools, if their intent is not in the right place, then I can become a boss.
Yeah.
And I can take teachers to task, but I always base it around intent. If a teacher raises their voice and they get upset, it's like, okay, why? Tell me why you got to that place. And if it's emotional, it's because they care too much. It's okay. Let's work with that. Let's work through that. But if somebody's being selfish or they're doing something for their own personal agenda, then I don't tolerate that shit. I just don't. That's when the Italian side kind of comes out, and it's like, no, now you're going to deal with a structural leader.
Yeah.
Now you're gonna know the principal's back in front of my name now.
Yeah.
It's not Leroy, right? And it's the same thing with kids. I get kids to a certain point. It's you want to draw that line at some point. You're gonna have to. I might have to suspend you, which is rare because we can usually work through it. But it happens. So I think people will see me as fair, great leader. But if I have to, I can do what I need to do to make sure that the ship is still going in the right direction.
Absolutely. So if anyone wants to get your latest book, they want to reach out, they want to learn more about you, any of the good business, where do they go?
Yeah, so they can go to leroyslanzi.com. That's the first place they can go to, or they can go onto Amazon. Both of my books, here, I'll show you. This one is one I'm pretty proud of it here. It's just a little one. It's called And
Yeah.
Breathe.
Yeah.
It's just a book of 50 breathing strategies for parents and kids. That's also on Amazon.com. And then, and of course, here, the Emotional Schools one. They can go on
Yes.
Amazon.com. They can go to leroyslanzi.com. I do coaching for parenting and coaching for teachers and leaders as well. And I do lots of workshops. So if anybody wants me to get on a Zoom with them or collaborate with them, they go to leroyslanzi.com. They can find my information there. And I'd be more than happy to help
I love
anyone.
it. Right on. Leroy, it's so great to meet you. Thank you, sir, for your story, for your passion, and best of luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Dude, if I ever come to Kansas City, because my plan is to go watch a 49ers game in every city as I get closer to my kids going, come to Kansas City. I'm looking you up. We'll go have a beer and
Hit me up, Paisan. Let's do it. I love it.
okay, man. Thank you very much for having me. Hey,
Yes, sir. Take care, man.
take it easy.